One guy was, one was security, I don't know who he was, but he was worried about my cable. I'm like,
yeah, call me. You have my number? No.
Maybe I do. I gotta see.
Okay, here we go. So I think
How you doing? No, usually not. No tripod. They don't even give me a chair. So tomorrow's is Franklin coming? Lauren.
Okay, Tim, are you ready for them to the White House? They've got I told Wayne to hold up the car.
Oh, God.
He has to turn. That's all the way. Are you good, Danny? Are you good, Danny? Got a shot at it. Back. Back.
I'm listening.
Können Sie eine Erwachung?
James, you want to just widen out too?
Oh, that's right.
He's going back down to widen it now. Just caught him at the top of the steps. some limo action out front. I don't know who it is, but somebody's pulling up with at the GA. Oh my God, come on. Keep it.
Okay, okay.
Good morning. Good morning. I would appreciate if you can take your seats. We are going to start now.
Good morning, everybody, and please have a seat. If I could ask for everybody's attention and finding a seat. I call to order the high-level plenary meeting to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. I would kindly ask all delegations to take a seat and keep silent. On the left side of the room, could you please, also on the blue seats, on the left side, please take a seat. I call to order the high-level plenary meeting to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. I would like to warmly welcome all of you to this milestone anniversary of our United Nations. Now, when everybody has found a seat, and in respect to the performance we are hearing right now, I now invite the artists to take their position on the stage. I would like to welcome the Met Chorus artists, accompanied by pianist Mr. Howard Watkins, together with the Sing for Hope youth choirs, under the direction of Mr. Tillman Michael. They will be performing this morning the commemoration of the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations. I now invite delegations to sit down, enjoy and listen to the musical performance. Nations in ruins, more than 70 million dead, 2 world wars in a single generation, the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust, and 72 territories still under colonialism. This was our world 80 years ago. A desperate world, grasping for any sign of hope. Courageous leaders gave that hope through our Charter of the United Nations, When signed on 26 June 1945, it was more than yet another empty political declaration. It was a promise from leaders to their people and from nations to one another that humanity had learned from its darkest chapters. It was a pledge not to deliver us to heaven, but to never again be dragged into hell by the forces of hatred and unchecked ambition. An acknowledgement that our failures came not from a lack of power, but from complacency. And the strong belief that our world could be better, that we could be better together. In the darkest moments of history, our grandmothers and grandfathers had the humility, grace, and I dare to say, good sense to put aside their differences, their self-interest and their resentments, and to agree to work together. When faced with a crossroads, they chose the right path, the path of hope. But hope is not blind optimism. It's not the guarantee that everything will work out. It's a deep belief that we are doing the right thing, regardless of whether we succeed. Today, the hours indeed feel dark once again. We stand at a similar crossroads. We see children without parents searching for food in the ruins of Gaza, the ongoing war in Ukraine, sexual violence in Sudan, gangs terrorizing people in Haiti, unfiltered hatred online, and floods and droughts all over the world. Is this a world envisioned in our charter? Do we really need to relearn the hard lessons? Today is not about celebrating. It's about remembering those hard lessons and drawing on the courage to once again agree, to find hope instead of resignation, to find the spirit from 80 years ago once again, to choose the right path, not because of any guarantee, but because of the conviction that it's the right thing to do. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, Heads of States, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to thank the artists, especially the young artists, for their wonderful performance, which have set the tone for our event. Today, as we mark 80 years of our United Nations, we are once again standing at a crossroads. We cannot take the easy path and simply give up. We have to choose the right path to show the world that we can be better together. Not because the last 80 years were perfect, not because for 80 years, because we have tried. For 80 years, this building has stood as a monument to our shared hopes for a better future. Yes, we have disagreed, we have struggled, but we have also triumphed. For 80 years, this institution has driven progress on sustainable development, peace and security, and human rights. Today's commemoration is not the story of an institution. It's the story of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people who tried to turn hope in something real. The people who stood between war and peace and chose peace. The people who are risking their lives to deliver food in Gaza. The people who are supplying education materials to girls in Afghanistan. The people who not only wear the symbol of the United Nations, but are out there on the ground, showing how we are better together. This is why this is the theme of this 80th session, better together. It's more than a hot motto, it's a hard-won truth. It's our commitment for the next 80 years. Our commitment to not only hope for problems to vanish, but to find the courage to confront them. Better together means to act where action is hard, to choose dialogue and diplomacy when division is easier. Hope at this 80th anniversary means that this session is not remembered not only for its milestone year, but as a moment when we called on extraordinary resolve equal to the extraordinary challenges we face. We owe this to the people, to the men and women, boys and girls who are not giving up, even in the darkest hours of war, who look still to the streaming blue flag for hope, the flag of our United Nations. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. I now invite delegations to view a short film on the occasion of the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations entitled Better Together.
Chose peace. People who said, dignity cannot be broken. People who carried food on their backs, who rebuilt schools, who gave shelter to strangers. People who stood for the earth before it was too late. And the people who will carry it forward. The young, the unheard, the unstoppable. For 80 years, this has been and will be the work of humanity. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. 80 years and more for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. UN. Better together.
I give the floor to His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations.
Madam President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. As we mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, I invite you to return for a moment to our earliest days. When the organization first opened its doors, many of its staff bore visible wounds from war, a limp, a scar, a burn. One of them was Major Brian Urquhart, the second person to be hired by the UN. A British soldier during the Second World War, he had been blown up on a ship in the Channel, witnessed the liberation of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, and carried for the rest of his life the limp from a parachute that failed to open. He was not alone. A clerk might quietly mention a bullet wound. A delegate, the shard of shrapnel still lodged in its chest. They had seen the worst of humanity, the horrors of the death camps, the cruelty of combat, cities entirely wiped out. And it was precisely because of what they had witnessed that they chose to serve peace. Excellencies, there is a persistent myth that peace is naive, that justice is sentimental, that the only real politics is the politics of power and self-interest. But those early staff were not idealists untouched by reality. They had seen war and they knew. Peace is the most courageous, the most practical, the most necessary pursuit of all. And in building the United Nations, they created something extraordinary, a place where all nations, large and small, could come together to solve problems that no country can solve alone. And yet, at this moment, the principles of the United Nations are under assault as never before. As we meet, civilians are targeted and international law trampled in Gaza, the Ukraine, Sudan, and beyond. As we meet, poverty and hunger are on the rise as progress on the Sustainable Development Goals falters. As we meet, the planet burns with fires, floods, and record heat raging through climate chaos. And at the same time, we are moving towards a multipolar world, but without strong multilateral institutions, multipolarity has its risks, as Europe learned in the First World War. To meet these challenges, we must not only defend the United Nations, we must strengthen it. And that is the purpose of Agenda 2030, the Pact for the Future, and the UN80 initiative, to renew the foundations of international cooperation and to ensure that we can deliver for people everywhere. Excellences, au fil des
Excellencies, over the years, our organization has led the way to some of humanity's greatest triumphs. The eradication of smallpox, healing the ozone layer, and above all, the prevention of a third world war. The tests of the next 80 years will be both familiar and new. The battle will continue against war and poverty, but also climate chaos, runaway technologies, the militarization of space, and crises we cannot yet imagine. To meet these challenges, let us remember what our founders knew. The only way forward is together. Let us rise to this moment with clarity, courage, and conviction, and let us realize the promise of peace. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General. I have the honor now to give the floor to Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, former President of Liberia, 2011 Nobel Peace Laureate, and Africa's first elected female head of state, a champion of peace, justice, and democratic governments, a former United Nations staff member, and a steadfast voice for multilateralism.
Excellencies, Madam President of the General Assembly, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, friends, I'm honored to address this high-level meeting on peace and security as part of the UN 80th anniversary. 80 years After the founding, we must recommit to the Charter, to our common security, to the belief that nations can choose dialogue over destruction. We begin in Africa, our shared cradle of resilience and hope, where democracy is weakening, where fractures across borders from Sudan to the Sahel to the Great Lakes strain our regional architecture. Yet, across Africa, communities stand up to extreme violence. Regional bodies mediate transitions, and women's groups negotiate truces when the state is distant and humanity is near. We have learned hard lessons. Prevention costs less than reconstruction. Reconciliation is a process, not an event. Peace agreements require institutions and citizens to be real. When guns fall silent, skills training, jobs, justice, and dignity must follow swiftly. Liberia's story illustrates UN-led progress and success. The largest peacekeeping force joined Africa's forces to disarm fighters, support elections, reform security institutions, and create space for reconciliation and growth. India's all-female formed police unit strengthened protection and public trust. The mission ended with Liberia standing on its own feet, out of war, into a fragile peace with accountability, inclusive dialogue, and economic opportunity for young people. We must acknowledge that the multilateral architecture built to shield future generations from war is underperforming. That global leadership lacks a unified effort to respond to a technological-enabled world. Commemoration without candor is unaffordable. The world asks whether this House will protect civilians and uphold international humanitarian law. These are not words of despair. They are summons to repair. Our answer must go beyond words. It must translate into actions felt by a family in a tent, a nurse in a clinic, a child in school. A call for change, a renewed vision of collective security, and a broader approach to the triple planetary crisis and worsening inequality. The call for the new design of a new vision, better together, must ensure immediate protection of civilians, finance for conflict prevention, proposals that pay real people, leaders who are audible and accountable, women at the table with budgets that guarantee their participation in all peace negotiation delegations, and the deep weaponization of the information space. None of this is beyond our reach. The United Nations founding generation would ask if we are still worthy of the hopes inherited. Our answer must be yes. Not because the world is less dangerous, but because our determination is stronger. Better together. Your theme, better together, your theme, it must be a strategy. Regional bodies and the UN working together. Civil society and governments co-designing solutions. Women and men sharing power equally. Truth and reconciliation traveling the same road. Let us leave this anniversary with concrete commitments, funded priorities, and a timetable for action. Show those in shelters standing in the bread lines and awaiting news of loved ones that the United Nations, as it celebrates its 80th year, remains a place of peace, a place of refuge, a place of unity, and a place of hope. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ellen Johnson Sirleaf for your strong and wise words. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Gro Harlem Brundtland, former Prime Minister of Norway, former Director General of the World Health Organization, a medical doctor committed to health as a human right, and instrumental in placing sustainable development at the forefront of our international agenda.
Madam President, Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor for me to address you marking the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. I was born at the cusp of the World War II. My parents were both active in the resistance against the Nazi occupation of Norway, and we had to flee the country. Some of my earliest memories are from Sweden, where my parents worked for Norwegian refugees. And I grew up in a Europe where the ravages of war were still clearly visible, where millions carried terrible scars on their bodies and their souls. It is against this background that the UN was founded, not as a symbol, but as a solemn promise. A promise to equip humanity with legal and diplomatic tools to prevent wars of conquest and domination. A promise to enshrine universal human rights as a bulwark against totalitarianism, racism, and oppression. A promise to foster peace, development, and dignity for all people. So, Madam President, let me highlight two areas where the UN has made an undeniable difference that also are part of particular importance to me personally. First, sustainability. When Secretary General Javier Pérez de Cuellar asked me to chair the World Commission on Environment and Development, I accepted with great humility. And I am very proud of the report we produced, Our Common Future. It helped cement the concept of sustainable development in our collective consciousness. Thanks to UN-led efforts, we started charting a path towards economic development that does not destroy the basis of life for future generations, our climate and our natural environment. But we are today exceeding the planet's boundaries and approaching tipping points where there is no way back. Over 80% of the targets under the Sustainable Development Goals are today off track. Second, President, gender equality. During the UN's International Year Women's Year in 1975, I had just entered government for the first time. Many of my male colleagues hardly knew how to deal with me. In 1979 came the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women. In 1981, I became Prime Minister for the first time. In 1995, 30 years ago this month, I delivered my address at the 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing. I spoke of the moral and economic imperative to end gender apartheid. I believed too optimistically that we would have come further by now. I did not foresee the intensity of the pushback that would come. Even today, there are countries where not a single woman sits in the highest decision-making bodies, including among the P5. But despite such adversity, the UN has methodically worked to strengthen the position of women through education, through microfinance, through work for sexual and reproductive rights and health, and through intense and effective advocacy work. With resolve and determination, we will get there in the end. So, Madam President, I have lived longer than most of you. I have witnessed the tangible differences the UN makes through economic upturns and downturns, political ebbs and flows. I have no patience for those who dismiss the UN as outdated. We are going through a time of great geopolitical shifts and impressive, but also frightening, technological development. The UN as our common hub for getting the facts on the table, debating and deciding on solutions, and acting is more important than ever. We owe that not just to ourselves, but to the generations to come. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Gro Harlem Brundtland for her blunt and powerful words. I have the honor now to give the floor to Ms. Maria Ressa, 2021 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, award-winning journalist, professor at Columbia University, co-founder of Rappler online news site, and a fearless defender of freedom of expression in the face of constant political harassment and arrests.
President Baerbock, Secretary General Guterres, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm normally chasing you here, and here I am. It's actually a very interesting place. Look, 80 years ago, this institution was born to prevent humanity from destroying itself. Never again, after fascism manipulated information, eroded truth, and dehumanized entire populations to enable genocide and global war. Today, we stand on the rubble of the world that was, and the challenge is to rebuild the United Nations for now, for this moment, when similar forces that led to those atrocities 80 years ago are now surging through digital platforms, insidiously manipulating us for power and profit. The biggest battle we face today is impunity, and it leads to our dehumanization in both the physical world, where wars rage from Ukraine to Gaza, and in the virtual world, where our minds and emotions are manipulated by surveillance capitalism for profit. To fight that, we need information integrity to remind us to be human. I became a journalist because information is power. But news groups lost our gatekeeping powers when an atom bomb exploded in our information ecosystem, a technological one that's silently destroying the very foundations the UN was built to protect. This is the deadliest period for journalists in recorded history. More than 240 journalists killed in Gaza alone. More than died in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, and the former Yugoslavia combined. This is unprecedented. They're targeted, and there must be accountability. We're living through an information Armageddon, where lies spread 6 times faster than facts on social media. That's a 2018 MIT study. It is so much worse today with generative AI. And the 3 sentences I've said over and over since 2016, without facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust. Without these 3, we don't have a shared reality. We can't begin to solve any problems, let alone the existential ones you heard from the speakers before me. We cannot have journalism. We cannot have electoral integrity. We cannot have democracy. This is manipulation of human behavior at the cellular levels of our countries. Algorithms reward outrage over empathy, spreading fear, anger, and hate, pumping us full of toxic sludge. Regulating technology isn't a free speech issue, it's about public safety. Because as has been proven time and time again, online violence is real-world violence. As a Filipino, I'm proud that my country was a charter member of the United Nations, one of only 3 Asian founding nations. Our commitment to multilateralism and peace runs deep. But that legacy was tested under the Duterte administration. Among the actions it took, it filed 11 criminal charges against me in a little over a year. Until today, I still need Supreme Court approval to be here. But I'm here. And my former president, well, he was arrested in March for alleged crimes against humanity and is detained at The Hague waiting for trial. Impunity ends. The rule of law, championed now by the Philippines as it chairs the 6th Committee on Legal Questions, ultimately prevailed. We moved to it. The trends are clear. We are electing illiberal leaders democratically. As of March this year, VDEM said that 72% of the world is now under authoritarian rule. So we turn to you at the UN. It has its critics because you have to move faster. Security Council votes paralyze action on major crises. Outdated representation excludes rising powers. Bureaucratic processes respond too slowly to urgent threats. But as you know, the solution isn't to abandon multilateralism, it's to strengthen it by addressing the very impunity that undermines international law. At this time of creative destruction, I implore you to create. Here are 3 solutions. First, end big tech impunity through global accountability. We need binding standards for international to restore and regulate information integrity, just as we have for nuclear weapons and climate change. There are two new initiatives, first from the Vatican, created last weekend with His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, a declaration demanding artificial intelligence remain under human control with clear accountability mechanisms. The second one will be launched later today, a global call for AI red lines, which more than 200 of us have signed. We urge your governments to establish clear international boundaries to prevent universally unacceptable risks for AI, at the very least define what AI should never be allowed to do. Second, build alternative infrastructures for trust. It isn't just big tech that failed to protect the public in the virtual world. It's also you, the governments. At Rappler, we built a chat app using open source protocols. Countries that care about data privacy, France, Germany, all their government websites are on the Matrix protocol. It allows real people to talk to real people without manipulation. The vision is a global federation of trusted news organizations, because this is how journalism will survive and how we begin to build infrastructures of trust. Finally, the third one, create, that's our word today. Invest in comprehensive solutions. Let your imagination run. 3 examples that's happening now. More than 3/4 of UN members now recognize Palestinian statehood, showing that international law can advance despite impunity. On gender, the Nobel Women's Initiative have pointed out, demonstrated that in nearly every conflict around the world, women are leading efforts for peace, defying displacement, patriarchy, gender apartheid, and militarized violence every day. And finally, on Wednesday, Demokrasya Siempre, 20 nations will pledge to strengthen democratic institutions and fight for information integrity. More than 40 Nobel laureates we have gathered together to support this multilateral initiative led by the Global South. Information integrity is the mother of all battles. Win this, and we can win the rest. Lose this, and we lose everything. Please choose courage over comfort, facts over fiction, hope over fear. A lot has changed since the UN was created 80 years ago. But its values, peace, human rights, justice, rule of law, these are more essential today than ever. It is time to create again, to build better, together. Please act now, before it's too late. Thank you.
I thank Maria Ressa also for her very powerful words. I now invite Ms. Mariam Burka, United Nations Global Advocate for Peace and youth leader, whose work bridges art, activism, championing women's rights, youth empowerment, and peace building, to recite a poem.
The President, Secretary General, distinguished delegates, excellencies, good morning. Walking these halls, I realized that the United Nations was not built from harmony. It grew out of the ashes of war and the grief watered by the collective memory of what happens when dialogue and cooperation fails. Its foundation is not peace achieved, but peace pursued, fragile, imperfect, necessary, not just worth fighting for, but requiring a fight. And today, 80 years on, we gather to honor what has been achieved. Nations rebuilt, walls of division lowered, millions lifted by the shared will. But these are victories worth remembering, but the story is unfinished. The cracks in the foundation calls us to repair, to act, not to retreat. Our world bleeds before our eyes. Children in conflict zones, nations silenced by hunger and war. And it begs the question, are we witnessing the collapse of conscience in real time? Because behind every pact, there are people. Behind every statistic, there is a story. And behind every commitment that we sign, there are lives depending on whether we honor our words or not. And so this is not the time to feel powerless, because yes, hope and despair can coexist in the same breath, because healing is not linear. The United Nations is not a monument, it is a mirror. And it reflects what we have dared to imagine 80 years ago. And today, here, it asks, will we dare again? Will we dare to work better together? Because if the past proves that we can build peace from ashes, then the present demands that we build it again, louder, braver, together. I speak as a global peace advocate, not because peace is easy, but because silence is complicity, and so I will not be silent. You know, I used to think that peace was a place, a final destination we arrive at after all wars have ended. But I have come to understand that peace is not a line that we cross. It is a choice that we make over and over and over again, especially when it is the hardest, especially when it feels far away. Peace is not a silence we force into people's mouths. It is not the absence of war, but the presence of understanding. Peace is a child learning to sleep again without flinching at the wind. It is a mother not having to choose between bread and dignity. It is a father not having to swallow his voice to feel like a man. Peace is messy, like forgiveness. It does not arrive in parade floats. Sometimes it comes crawling through broken windows when we finally agree that being right is not better than being whole. Peace is not found, it is built, brick by brutal brick, by hands that once knew how to fight, now choose to hold instead. There was a time when we measured strength by how long we could hold a grudge. But today, let us measure strength by how long we could hold space for someone else's truth. Because there was a me and a you before there was ever an us. And if us is broken, then peace is what lets us lay down the shards without aiming at each other's throats. Peace is the poem you write after the war in your chest has finally run out of ink. It is the moment you return to your body and find yourself still standing. Peace is not easy. And so let us not forget the ones who have carried peace quietly through the fire. The women whose hands mend what war has torn, who rebuild homes from memory, raise children between checkpoints, hold their families like nations, because peace has always known the name of a woman, carried through the way that she chooses courage over collapse again and again. And so today I speak peace into the bones of this world, into the rubble, into the rage, into the ruins. Because if war teaches us how to shatter, then peace must teach us how to stay soft, to stay human. And perhaps what makes us human is not that we always succeed in peace, but that we dare again and again to seek it, refusing to let our brokenness be the end of our story. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Burkhan, and as we conclude and after listening to this beautiful poem, let me emphasize again, peace is only a word and better together is only a slogan until we embrace it. So I invite you to embrace and live up to be better together over this 80th session.
This is not the story of an institution. It's the story of people. People who stood between war and peace, and chose peace. People who said, dignity cannot be broken. People who carried food on their backs, who rebuilt schools, who gave shelter to strangers. People who stood for the earth before it was too late. And the people who will carry it forward. The young, the unheard, the unstoppable. For 80 years, this has been and will be the work of humanity. Not perfect, not finished, but always better together. 80 years and more for peace, human rights, and sustainable development. UN. Better together.
Before adjourning this meeting, I would like to remind delegation that the high-level meeting on the 30th anniversary of Fourth World Conference on Women will begin immediately in this hall. Delegations are therefore requested to remain seated while the stage is being prepared for the next meeting. The high-level plenary meeting to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the establishment of the United Nations has concluded. I thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
The 10,002nd meeting of the Security Council is called to order. The provisional agenda for this meeting is threats to international peace and security. The agenda is adopted. I would like to warmly welcome distinguished ministers and other high-level representatives present in the Security Council chamber. Your presence today underscores the importance of the subject matter under discussion. In accordance with Rule 37 of the Council's Provisional Rules of Procedure, I invite the representative of Estonia, Germany, Latvia, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Poland, Romania, Sweden, and Ukraine to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provision Rules of Procedure, I invite Mr. Miroslav Jenča, Assistant Secretary General for Europe, Central Asia, and Americas, Departments of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and Peace Operations, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. In accordance with Rule 39 of the Council's Provision Rules of Procedure, I also invite Her Excellency Ms. Kaja Kallas, High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission, to participate in this meeting. It is so decided. The Security Council will now begin its consideration of item 2 of the agenda. I now give the floor to Mr. Miroslav Jenča.
Mr. President, in a letter dated 20 September 2025, addressed to the President of the Security Council, the permanent representative of Estonia to the United Nations informed that on 19 September, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighters entered up to 10 kilometers inside Estonia's airspace for 12 minutes in violation of Estonian airspace. The United Nations is not in a position to confirm any of the claims made regarding the incident and does not have any further details of the events. This briefing is therefore solely based on information available from public sources. According to the Estonian Ministry of Defense, the incursion took place between 9:58 a.m. and 10:11 a.m. in the area of Vaindloo, a small island located in the Gulf of Finland in the Baltic Sea. According to the ministry, the jets entered the Estonian airspace without permission and had their transponders switched off and did not have flight plans, potentially endangering other aircraft. According to Estonian and Italian officials, Italian F-35 fighters attached to NATO's air defense support mission in the Baltic states were reportedly activated to intercept the Russian jets and warn them off. Sweden, as part of its national response and in coordination with NATO, along with Finland, also reportedly scrambled a rapid reaction aircraft. Estonia stated that this latest incident follows 4 violations of its airspace by Russia this year, and it has requested consultations with NATO allies under Article 4 of the Washington Treaty. The meeting of the NATO North Atlantic Council has been reportedly scheduled to take place tomorrow, 23 September. On 20 September, Russia's defense ministry stated that its fighter jets made a scheduled flight from Karelia on the border with Finland to an airfield in the Kaliningrad region in strict accordance with international airspace rules, without deviating from the agreed flight path and without violating Estonian airspace. According to the Russian Federation, the flight path was over neutral waters of the Baltic Sea, more than 3 kilometers from the island of Vindlo. Mr. President, this latest development follows reported violations by Russian drones of Polish and Romanian airspace. On 12 September, this council convened to discuss the incursion of 19 Russian drones into Poland between 9 and 10 September. On 13 September, according to Romania's Ministry of Defense, a Russian drone was detected in Romanian airspace as 2 Romanian F-16 jets were monitoring the country's border with Ukraine after Russian air attacks on Ukraine. The ministry said that the drone did not fly over populated areas or pose imminent danger. This series of recent incidents further underscored the already high tensions that endanger European security as the war continues to rage in Ukraine. Violations of sovereign countries' airspace are unacceptable. We again urge all concerned to act responsibly, to use all available channels, and to take immediate steps to de-escalate tensions and prevent further risks to regional security. The world simply cannot afford such danger to spiral out of control and for the devastating war in Ukraine to further escalate and expand. Mr. President, over the weekend in Ukraine, Russian drones and missiles continued to hit several regions, killing at least 3 people, injuring dozens more, and damaging civilian infrastructure and residential buildings. Several civilian casualties were reported across the country. According to the Ukrainian authorities, in the central city of Dnipro, a missile with the reported cluster munition hit a residential apartment building, killing at least 1 person and injuring at least 30 others. Local officials reported that 2 people were also killed in the Chernihiv region in the north and the Khmelnytsky region in the west of the country. According to the Ukrainian authorities, over the past week, Russia launched more than 1,500 attack drones, 1,280 guided aerial bombs, and 50 missiles of various types. This represents a clear escalation of Russia's attacks against Ukrainian cities and towns. More casualties were also reported over the weekend in the Belgorod region of the Russian Federation, where, according to local officials, 2 civilians were reportedly killed and 4 injured as a result of Ukrainian shelling and drone attacks. The continuing trend of intensifying widespread attacks once again underscores the need to build on recent initiatives for diplomatic efforts toward peace before the situation reaches even more dangerous levels. We reiterate our call for a full, immediate, and unconditional ceasefire to pave the way for a just, lasting, and comprehensive peace in Ukraine in line with the UN Charter, international law, and relevant UN resolutions. The United Nations remains ready to support all meaningful efforts to this end. I thank you.
I thank Mr. Yencha for his briefing. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Lars Roque Rasmussen, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Denmark.
First of all, I would like to thank Assistant Secretary General Jenka for his informative briefing. 10 days ago, in this chamber, Denmark's representative expressed our condemnation of the violations of Poland's airspace by Russian military drones. And within 4 days, another Russian military drone incursion took place, this time into Romanian airspace, Denmark condemns the violation of the territorial integrity of Romania. And today we meet again, yet again, to discuss a reckless and dangerous violation by Russia, with 3 fighter jets entering Estonia's airspace last Friday. For 12 minutes and penetrating 10 kilometers deep north of Tallinn, until escorted out of Estonian airspace by NATO jets. Let there be no doubt, I condemn this latest violation of Estonia's sovereignty and territorial integrity by Russia. Our support for Estonia remains steadfast. Our resolve to stand by our allies remains equally firm. Together with EU partners and NATO allies, we will continue to offer support to Estonia in protecting its borders. Mr. President, these are reckless and dangerous escalations and provocations by the Russian Federation. These are threats to intimidate countries to stop supporting Ukraine and to test our resolve. Russia clearly feels it can act with impunity in Ukraine, the Baltic Sea, the Black Sea, the whole of Eastern Europe. Denmark and its allies will not be provoked by Russia. On the contrary, it only strengthens our resolve and further intensifying our long-standing support to Ukraine, whatever threats are made. We have seen this playbook before. The invasion of Georgia, the annexation of Crimea, the invasion of the Donbas, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Russia's neighbors, not unreasonably, fear there could be the next. Denmark stands fully behind Estonia's territorial integrity. The Russian provocations must end immediately. Therefore, we tell the Russian Federation today, step back, take another path. We will not allow the unraveling of the European security architecture. We will not allow Russia to project chaos and uncertainty wherever it wants. And more broadly, these recent air incursions undermine the fundamental pillars of international law that we all benefit from. Mr. President, when the UN was created 80 years ago, the aim was to stop larger states from bullying and terrorizing smaller states, to create an order in which all countries are sovereign, where their territorial integrity is respected. Denmark remains fully committed to these principles. I thank you.
His Excellency Mr. Rasmussen for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Georgios Gerapatritis, Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Hellenic Republic.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I would like to thank the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Korea for convening the important emergency meeting. I would like also to thank Assistant Secretary General Jenka for his insightful briefing, and I welcome the participation of fellow foreign ministers and deputy foreign ministers, as well as of the High Representative of the European Union and Vice President Ms. Kallas in this meeting. Dear colleagues, as this organization celebrates the 80th year since its establishment, international order, peace and security are gravely challenged around the globe. It is therefore our urgent and imperative duty to heighten our vigilance and intensify our efforts to meet and contain these challenges, protect international peace and security, and avoid escalations. Only in this way we will be fulfilling the core task of the Security Council. In the course of these last 2 weeks, NATO and EU's airspace has been violated 3 times, as Russian aerial means entered, contrary to international law, the territory of Poland, Romania, and Estonia. The latest incident, involving the incursion of Estonian airspace by 3 armed Russian fire jets, cannot be viewed in isolation. Reckless acts of this kind are not new, but their successive recurrence indicates they are not mere coincidences. As the saying goes, once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 is a pattern. Greece unequivocally condemns the violation of Estonia's, and for that matter, any member state's airspace. We stand in full solidarity with Estonia, a friendly country and an EU and NATO ally. Any violation of state borders, be it air, sea, or land borders, constitutes a clear and blatant breach of international law and the UN Charter, and is unacceptable, particularly coming from a permanent member of the Security Council. We call on Russia to cease these unlawful acts immediately and respect its obligations under international law. Colleagues, it is evident that this new escalation is a direct result of Russia's war in Ukraine. Greece has welcomed President Trump's initiative for meeting President Putin in Alaska in August, as well as any initiative that could result in the termination of the war. Nevertheless, these violations as acts of aggression contradict the spirit of the Anchorage meeting. Lastly, dear colleagues, we're now witnessing the destabilizing effects of the war and its wider implications for the security of Eastern Europe and of the wider region. This is why, once again, we call on Russia to stop its armed aggression. A comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine based on the principles of sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of states must remain our foremost goal. A peace safeguarded by credible and robust security guarantees which will effectively deter any recurrence of armed aggression that precludes further escalation and that is in line with international law, the UN Charter, the General Assembly resolutions, and the Helsinki Final Act. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Gerard Patritis for the statement. And I give the floor to Her Excellency Mr. Yvette Cooper, MP, Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the Assistant Secretary-General for that briefing. For 3.5 years, the world has witnessed a permanent member of this Council engaged in the full-scale and unprovoked invasion of another state, a violation of its most basic obligations under the UN Charter. As President Trump and President Zelensky have worked for peace, the Russian Federation has starkly escalated its attacks. Attacks on the Council of Ministers, on the British Council building, and repeated attacks on residential flats and homes as children sleep in their beds. And we meet today now at the request of Estonian allies because Russia's recklessness is escalating. In the last 2 weeks alone, over 20 Russian drones in Polish airspace, a drone through Romanian territory, and now 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets with their transponders turned off, violating Estonian airspace for 12 minutes. At best, these latest acts are dangerous and reckless. At worst, they are a deliberate attempt to undermine the territorial integrity of sovereign nations and European security. They risk miscalculation. They open the door to direct armed confrontation between NATO and Russia. NATO's combined strength is unparalleled, and its determination to defend peace and security in Europe is unshakable. Of this, Russia must be in no doubt. And I commend the resolute and firm response of Estonia, Poland, and Romania, and all NATO allies. I welcome the launch of Eastern Sentry on 12th of September to ensure the safety and security of the Alliance's eastern border, and I'm proud that UK aircraft are taking part. And to those nations and to all NATO allies, I say, the United Kingdom stands in full solidarity with you at this time and always. And to President Putin, I say, your reckless actions risk a direct armed confrontation between NATO and Russia. Our alliance is defensive, but be under no illusion. We stand ready to take all steps necessary to defend NATO's skies and NATO's territory. We are vigilant and we are resolute. And if we need to confront planes that are operating in NATO airspace without permission, then we will do so. The United Kingdom stands by our friends. We are unwavering in our support for the principles of the UN Charter, for our NATO allies, and for Ukraine. And we are committed to increasing the pressure on Russia until it ends its illegal war against Ukraine, ceases its reckless acts, and respects the sovereignty of other states. Russia's imperialist warmongering is a threat to international peace and security. It is a threat to the values and principles that underpin this organization that has done so much to support stability and prosperity these past 80 years. We must counter it for the sake of us all. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Cooper for her statement. And I give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Melita Gabric, Deputy Minister for Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also want to thank the Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Miroslav Jenča, for your important contribution. Excellencies, we are meeting here for the second time in just 10 days due to the reckless behavior of the Russian Federation that poses a threat to international security. 10 days ago, we discussed a drone incursion into Polish airspace, an incident involving more than 20 drones, making a significant escalation in scale and intensity. Today, we are addressing a new provocation: Russian fighter jets' incursion into Estonian airspace, an incident that was not merely momentary, but deliberate and dangerous. Slovenia supported the call for this meeting, and we stand firmly and without reserve with Estonia, its security, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. Excellencies, let me say this in no uncertain terms. We condemn this escalation. At a time when tensions are already dangerously high, this is not the moment for military provocation. This is a high time for dialogue, a high time for diplomacy. When we previously discussed the drone incursion into Poland, our ambassador spoke of the growing unease with which we are witnessing such behavior across Europe. Let us be honest with ourselves around this very table of the Security Council. These actions do not occur in a vacuum. They are unfolding as we are well in the 4th year of Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. These deliberate provocations are symptomatic of the time we live in, a time in which violations of international law are tolerated to an extent we have not seen in modern history. Slovenia says a clear and principled no to such behavior, wherever it may occur and whoever may be the perpetrator. If we can clearly say no to Israeli atrocities committed in Gaza, to terrorist violence, we must not shy away from condemning Russian aggression against Ukraine. Excellencies, let us also be clear on another matter. Europe wants peace. Europe wants a ceasefire, and we want to see the beginning of serious and meaningful peace negotiations between Ukraine and the Russian Federation as soon as possible. Despite the best efforts by President Trump in Alaska, we still await a meaningful gesture from Russia, a sincere willingness to come to the negotiating table. And while we wait, Russia continues its escalatory behavior, intensifying attacks on Ukrainian cities and endangering and intimidating civilians, both in Ukraine and in its neighboring countries. We hope the time is near when this Council will finally begin a principled and honest discussion about the war in Ukraine and decide to take action. Until then, and allow me to repeat this, Slovenia will stand firmly with Estonia, with Ukraine, and with any other member of this organization that needs to be protected from unlawful, charter-violating actions by those who believe that might makes right. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Gabric for her statement. And I give the floor to the representative of France.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to begin by thanking Assistant Secretary General Mr. Miroslav Jenča for his statement, and I would like to welcome the ministers present here, Foreign Affairs Minister of Estonia and from the other representatives from the European Union, and Madam Kallas. As we know, on the morning of 19th of September, Russia violated Estonian airspace with 3 fighter jets, which remained there for nearly 12 minutes. These elements lead us to consider that this is an intentional violation. This is the 3rd time in 10 days that Russia has violated the airspace of the European Union and NATO. This latest incursion leaves no room for doubt. Russia is choosing escalation and provocation. Mr. President, this Council had already met exactly 10 days ago to discuss the unacceptable intrusion of around 20 Russian drones into Poland in the context of a massive aerial attack against Ukraine. This new violation, this time carried out in broad daylight and by no fewer than 3 fighter jets, not drones, is unprecedented in over 20 years. It confirms the continuation and accumulation of Russia's provocative actions. Mr. President, France condemns in the strongest terms this dangerous and irresponsible incursion, which constitutes a blatant violation of international law. And we stand firmly alongside Estonia, to whom we express our friendship and our full and unwavering solidarity. France directly contributes to Estonia's security. We participate in the strengthening of our security posture on Europe's eastern flank, alongside our allies in the European Union and NATO. Mr. President, we must not forget that at the same time, Russia continues its war of aggression against Ukraine. Just hours after this incursion, it once again carried out massive strikes against Ukraine using 40 missiles and over 550 drones. Russia must understand that these violations of NATO airspace in no way undermine our determination to implement strong, robust, and credible security guarantees in favor of Ukraine. Mr. President, Ukraine courageously accepted 6 months ago now the principle of an unconditional ceasefire. It has demonstrated its willingness to negotiate. President Volodymyr Zelensky has, for the past 4 months, expressed his readiness for direct negotiations with President Vladimir Putin. Yet, as world leaders gather here in New York to mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, such a meeting has still not taken place. Russia, on the contrary, continues its aggression, and Russia is now escalating its intimidation of Ukraine's neighbors. It continues to violate and undermine the principles of the UN Charter, the territorial integrity and the sovereignty of states. It is up to Russia to seize the offer of a ceasefire and the opening of negotiations, as called for by the UN Secretary-General and the entire international community. Mr. President, it is our responsibility as members of the Security Council to acknowledge the obvious and to call upon Russia to end these reckless provocations and to put an end to the large-scale war that it launched more than 3 years ago on the European continent. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I thank ASG Janša for his briefing and welcome the high-level representatives of Estonia and other relevant countries to the meeting today. President, the airspace incident discussed by the Security Council today and the drone incident discussed a few days ago are both spillover effects of the Ukraine crisis. They reflect the lack of mutual trust and growing suspicions among relevant parties, and illustrate the complex and sensitive nature of the current European security situation. As long as the Ukraine crisis remains unresolved and the war continues, similar incidents are likely to reoccur. Therefore, the urgent imperative and fundamental solution are to realize a political resolution to the Ukraine crisis as soon as possible and to build balanced, effective, and sustainable European security architecture. Regarding the Ukraine crisis, we have fully elaborated our position on multiple occasions at the Security Council before. Tomorrow, the Council will hold a high-level meeting on the issue of Ukraine, when China will expound our position again. I will not go into details today. On the airspace incident, China urges the parties concerned to remain calm and exercise restraint, clarify facts and dispel doubts through dialogue and communication, avoid misunderstandings and misjudgments, and prevent the situation from expanding or escalating. We always maintain that countries should follow the purposes and principles of the UN Charter in handling international relations. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank ASG Yancha for his briefing on the development in the Baltic Sea region. I welcome His Excellency, the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Estonia, to this meeting, as well as the representative from the region. Mr. President, the situation in Eastern Europe remains a significant concern, carrying serious implications for regional stability and international norms. The divergent narratives surrounding the events of September 19, which are happening against the backdrop of the ongoing war in the region, underscore the urgency of the situation and the critical need for diplomacy and dialogue. Such incidents highlight the fragility and volatility in the region, reminding us of the fundamental principles enshrined in international law and the United Nations Charter, including the peaceful resolutions of disputes. We firmly maintain that there is no military solution to disagreements over airspace or territorial integrity. Continued escalations only serve to heighten tensions and undermine the process for a durable peace in the region. We believe that lasting solutions are found at the negotiating table, not through acts that can be interpreted as hostile. In this regard, we call upon all parties to exercise maximum restraint and engage in earnest, substantive dialogue. A durable solution will require a genuine commitment to de-escalation, confidence-building measures, and renewed focus for diplomatic efforts. To conclude, Mr. President, my delegation reaffirms its unwavering support for all efforts aimed at upholding the principles of international law and achieving just and lasting solutions consistent with the United Nations Charter. We firmly believe that the people in the region deserve a future defined by peace, security, and stability. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, President. There was a time when Europe, for many of us, was associated with the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, cutting-edge philosophy, culture, and science. Yet today, all of that, unfortunately, has gone, and it's gone for good. Voltaire, Rousseau, Kant, and other leading philosophers have been replaced with the von der Leyens, the Callises, and the Johnsons, as well as other small-time blinkered Russophobes, thanks to their efforts, the primitive hatred for our country, and an attempt to portray Russia as the main threat to pan-European security, is, before our very eyes, becoming the only ideology of European states. They're trying their utmost to make the next generation forget the bitter experience of predecessors of today's Euro-integrators. For instance, the experience of Napoleon and Hitler, who suffered defeat at our country's hands, for which Europe paid a lengthy and painful price. Any events are immediately interpreted through an anti-Russian prism. The very idea that war with Russia is unavoidable is being frantically pounded into the heads of the European populace. Russia is being branded all sorts of things, portrayed as an enemy, not even going to the trouble in principle of using facts or evidence. When these assertions turn out to be false, no one even thinks about apologizing for spreading such blatant lies. Today, we will have an excellent opportunity to see this for ourselves, given that in the room we have a lot of European extras. These extras will, as per usual, will be letting their imaginations run wild regarding the threat from Russia. This paranoia has reached never-before-seen heights. Just last week, we were compelled to listen in this chamber to groundless accusations about supposedly Russian UAVs entering Polish airspace. Not a single piece of evidence that these drones were of Russian provenance has been provided to date. It's telling that just a few days later, we heard that the incident involving damage to the roof of a residential house in Lublin province, which was a key component of this anti-Russia campaign, in reality was the result of a missile erroneously being dropped from a Polish fighter jet. The Polish Prime Minister Tusk today recognized that not a single drone that was found contained explosives. Not a single one posed a threat to civilians. As for the Polish opposition, it clearly said this is a blatant provocation, the aim being to pull Poland into war. President, we take very seriously allegations against our armed forces. We always try to get the facts, which should allow us to understand what actually happened. This is why, in trying to get to the bottom of the situation, we immediately proposed for the Polish side to engage in bilateral consultations with us. Yet we didn't get a sensible reaction from Warsaw. This attests to only one thing. Neither Warsaw nor Brussels want the truth. All they need is a pretext for a new wave of the Russophobia campaign they're engaged in. It's very difficult to comment. Our European neighbors are inculpating themselves so obviously. Anyone of sound mind, anyone who is familiar with elementary logic would never say such a situation is normal. But yet, if on every screen, in every social media outlet, on every page, you're being told that Russia is your only enemy, then you might start believing anything and everything. The facts, the evidence here are superfluous. Today, we're compelled to be here to watch part 2 of this spectacle entitled Blame Russia for Everything. Our neighbors have now imagined that Russia is at fault for an incursion into Estonian airspace. As always, there is no proof except the Russophobic hysteria coming from Tallinn, which our Estonian colleague will wax lyrical about a little bit later. As for the facts prove that on the 19th of September, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets conducted a planned flight from Karelia to an airbase in Kaliningrad Oblast, carried out in strict accordance with international airspace use rules. The Russian aircrafts did not stray from the agreed route, nor did they cross into Estonian airspace. Their trajectory, their flight was over the neutral waters of the Baltic Sea, over 3 kilometers from the island of Vindlo. Flight recorded data confirm this. If Estonia wanted to, it could have checked this itself. But Tallinn is not pursuing such an objective. Their goal is different, going against common sense and the facts to foment hysteria and accuse Russia of provocations. Thus, NATO representatives rushed to call what happened reckless behavior. And the head of European diplomacy, who also happens to be Estonian, called for a firm stance in support of the Baltic states. To be perfectly frank, our European colleagues deserve our sympathies. After all, the project they'd been building on our borders for years, the anti-Russia project, and this is what Ukraine was actually turned into after 2014, this project is coming apart at the seams, discrediting itself. Ukraine became the Zelensky concentration camp long ago. It's not sparing its people. They're dying by the thousands every day in a senseless meat grinder in the name of Western geopolitical interests. The Zelensky regime has turned its country into a symbol of corruption, outright theft, violations of human rights, the freedom of religion and the freedom of speech. In European capitals, despite all of this, they continue to laud so-called Ukrainian achievements, giving money and weapons to the Kiev regime, although they're clearly increasingly ashamed of their own puppets. However, they can't understand how to disentangle themselves from this fix. As a result, not-so-creative Euro bureaucrats have found nothing better to do than to whip up anti-Russian hysteria in the hope that European voters won't notice. This is a strange strategy, and without a doubt, it will achieve the opposite of what it intends to do. What will they accuse Russia of next? After all, they're not bothering to check the evidence nor the logical rationale for our actions. It's hard to think where their imaginations will take us next when no one cares about the facts. President, without a doubt, we understand that the hysteria of our European colleagues is also directed at trying to return the new US administration, including President Trump, to an anti-Russia course. It's aimed at undermining the understandings and undertakings entered into by Russia and the US by their presidents in Alaska a month ago. On this note, I'd like to quote the US Vice President, J.D. Vance, who at the Munich Security Conference at the start of this year voiced some uncomfortable conclusions, uncomfortable for Europe. The threat, and here I quote, the threat that I worry about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, not China. It's not any other actor, external actor. What I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States, end of quote. Despite this clear-cut diagnosis contained in the aforementioned quote, Europe decided not to listen. Europe today is like an unhinged, paranoid individual unable to respond to criticism. Nor is it able to remember the lessons of history. After all, for the current cast of European leaders and Euro bureaucrats, history was reset to zero in February of 2022. Thus, drawing the lessons of history for today's Europe is bad manners. But this is a very dangerous path. We all know that history is ruthless vis-a-vis those who forget its lessons. Thus, our former European partners, if you want to get hysterical, to foment and to continue levy baseless accusations, go right ahead. But do that without our participation. We won't be partaking in this theatre of the absurd, and you don't need us there. When you decide that you want to engage in a serious discussion about European security, about the fate of our common continent, about how to make this continent prosperous and secure for everybody, we'll be ready. You know where to find us. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Gracias, señor. Thank you, Mr. President. We are grateful for the detailed presentation of Undersecretary General Yencha, providing us with a more complete picture of the events that took place in Estonia on Friday, the 19th of September. And we'd also like to welcome the ministers distinguishing us today with their presence at this meeting. Just a week ago, this council met to consider with concern the incursion of Russian drones into Polish airspace. Today, once again, we find ourselves addressing similar events, this time concerning the incursion of Russian combat aircraft into Estonian airspace. These incidents, so close together in time and of such threatening nature, illustrate a pattern of actions that could undermine regional stability, and they are a cause of concern for us all. Panama rejects any act of intimidation of one state against another. The violation of Estonian airspace cannot be seen as an isolated event, but rather as an act that threatens international peace and security, the very pillars upon which this Council rests. President, the world is going through particularly turbulent times, where the proliferation of conflicts in all regions is directly and disproportionately affecting the civilian population and global stability. The accumulation of these intimidating incidents does not contribute in any way to peace or international stability. On the contrary, these events erode trust among states and create a climate of heightened tension and vulnerability for collective security, a situation that the world can no longer in this regard, we see that these acts are expanding. Activities in the region are showing this, despite the inconclusive results that have been achieved by efforts of the parties. We still hope that genuine dialogue and decisive diplomacy and commitment can put an end to this conflict. Let us use this space where today the highest authorities are gathered together to mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations, to resume efforts in the right direction. Panama calls for caution, and we reiterate once again the primacy of the principle of respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states, in full accordance with the purposes and principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter, to which we committed ourselves more than 80 years ago. Only through strict adherence to these principles can peace, security, and peaceful coexistence among states be guaranteed. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the outset, I would like to thank Mr. Miroslav Jenka for his valuable briefing. I would also like to welcome the Foreign Minister of Estonia and all the honorable ministers participating in this meeting. Mr. President, we meet today following recent reports that Russian military aircraft flew into the airspace of the Republic of Estonia on September the 19th. These developments could exacerbate tensions and further escalate the situation in the region, a region that is still suffering from the repercussions of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. On numerous occasions, Algeria has stressed the need to avoid any action or reaction that could inflame tensions. We have also repeatedly stressed the danger of succumbing to the logic of polarization in the context of this conflict. It's imperative to avoid any endeavor that could inflame hostilities or exacerbate their potential repercussions. In this vein, I would like to highlight the following points today. First, we believe that it is important to maintain the momentum of the recent diplomatic effort in order to prevent any escalation that could prolong or expand the conflict. Thereby, it might undermine any progress towards peace and security in the region. Second, it has become necessary to give precedence to communication and coordination in addressing these incidents through a transparent and effective approach. This would avoid any misunderstanding or confusion, and it would help to avoid the recurrence. Last but not least, we would like to reiterate once again our call for the primacy of the language of dialogue and negotiation. We must adhere to diplomatic solutions as the only feasible way forward to reach a just and lasting solution to the conflict. In conclusion, Algeria remains convinced that the realization of peace and security in Ukraine and through it in the region as a whole can only be achieved through the intensification of diplomatic efforts aimed at finding a final solution to this conflict. This should be based on the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter, taking into account the legitimate security concerns of both parties. My country also reiterates its commitment to support any effort that would contribute to the maintenance of international peace and security in the region. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President, for convening today's meeting at the request of Estonia, following the unauthorized entry into its airspace of 3 armed fighter jets reportedly belonging to the Russian Federation. I also thank ASG Janša for his briefing and welcome the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Estonia and other ministers and high-level officials in this meeting. Mr. President, Guyana has taken careful note of the letter dated 20th of September from the permanent representative of Estonia, in which he asserts that this was the 5th violation of Estonia's airspace by the Russian Federation, marking a dangerous escalation and the most serious violation thus far. We have also taken note of the public statement issued by the Russian authorities denying that the three jets violated Estonia's airspace. Saturday's incident appears to follow a pattern of similar events in the region that are unfolding in the context of the ongoing armed conflict in Ukraine. When this council met last week to address a similar incident in Poland, we affirmed that the violation of a country's airspace is a serious breach of its territorial integrity and a violation of international law. We also agreed on the need for de-escalation and for the states involved to establish the facts and act responsibly to avoid any further escalation of an already dangerous situation. Today, as we confront another allegation of incursion by the Russian Federation, I would like to stress the following 2 points. First, as we did last week, Guyana calls for restraint and de-escalation, and for the facts surrounding this recent incident to be thoroughly clarified. Given that there have been similar incidents in the recent past, it is reasonable to assume that they will continue to occur unless appropriately addressed. In this respect, we underscore the need for the Security Council to have access to detailed and verifiable information regarding the incidents and encourage the relevant parties to cooperate with the United Nations toward that end. Secondly, Guyana recalls the legal obligation of all UN member states to comply strictly with international law, including the provisions of the United Nations Charter and Security Council Resolution 2788. Mr. President, members of the Security Council have a collective responsibility to find ways and means of preventing disputes from escalating, including through diplomatic efforts, and must apply the tools provided in the Charter and relevant conventions for the peaceful settlement of any dispute between states. On the broader question of the ongoing armed conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we reiterate our demand for an immediate and peaceful end to the war and for the full implementation of Security Council Resolution 2774. Any expansion of this conflict will have dire consequences for innocent civilians in the region and for the world at large. This must be avoided at all cost. In closing, Mr. President, I once again urge the Russian Federation to cooperate with the affected states as well as the United Nations in providing the necessary information and finding a peaceful path forward. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also thank ASG Yenke for his briefing. We welcome the participation of the representatives of Estonia, Ukraine, and other participants under Rule 37. The letter dated 20 September 2025 from the permanent representative of Estonia reporting a serious violation of its airspace is of grave concern. This report, viewed together with the earlier letter from the permanent representative of Poland on the Russian Federation's drones entering its airspace, similarly reflects an alarming pattern, increasing the risk of a regional conflagration with global consequences. Mr. President, regrettably, the 3 rounds of talks in Istanbul, which led to agreements on exchanges of prisoners of war and civilian detainees, as well as the return of Ukrainian children, and which had raised hopes for a political solution, have not been matched with advancement in the ceasefire and peace agreement negotiations. On the contrary, military operations in Ukraine have intensified and now reached the breach of airspaces of Estonia, Poland, and Romania. The responses for the 3 countries and NATO underscore the gravity of the threat. They signal that prolonging the conflict risks spillover, regional escalation, and global insecurity. Given the adverse implications of a protracted conflict in Europe, the Council and the wider international community must intensify efforts towards peace. Sierra Leone has consistently called for an end to this war, urging the parties to embrace diplomacy and agree to a ceasefire that prevents further death and suffering. The humanitarian toll is devastating, with over 6,500 civilians having been killed in Ukraine this year alone, including rising numbers of children among the dead and injured. More than 10 million people have been displaced, creating the largest refugee crisis in Europe since the Second World War. Mr. President, Sierra Leone reiterates that the UN Charter enshrines the principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. Article 2.3 obliges member states to resolve disputes by peaceful means while refraining from the threat of use of force. The disregard of these principles and international law, the repeated resort to force, and the inability to secure ceasefires are deeply troubling. Aware of the consequences of this conflict, which could plunge the region into chaos, we call for measured responses by NATO and individual states, making use of Article 4 consultations to de-escalate and renew political dialogue. We commend the ongoing efforts by the United States, European leaders, and other mediators, and this Council to seek a peaceful resolution and a sustained political engagement at the highest levels. We again call on the parties to engage in genuine negotiations towards a political settlement that opposes Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders, while addressing the legitimate security concerns of all parties. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for the statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank ASG Shansha for his briefing. We also welcome the distinguished Foreign Minister of Estonia, other ministers, and the EU High Representative to this meeting. President, prolonged and intense conflicts, no matter how localized, create a vortex of instability with spillover effects that invariably affect regional and global stability. And what we are witnessing around us today is a practical manifestation of this fundamental truth about conflicts. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine, now into its fourth year, has generated numerous challenges, both for the regional and international peace and stability. And Pakistan, alongside our fellow council members, has repeatedly drawn attention to the negative consequences of this conflict and the need to bring it to an end. We take note of Estonia's letter of 20th September addressed to this council informing about violations of its airspace. Pakistan is an ardent proponent and strong adherent to the UN Charter and its principles. Sovereignty and territorial integrity of all member states are cornerstone principles of the UN Charter, are sacrosanct and must be respected universally. Pakistan remains deeply perturbed by the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, especially its humanitarian consequences that have adversely impacted the lives of millions of people in the region. Cessation of hostilities and return to diplomacy remain the only path for achieving sustainable peace. In line with our clear and consistent position, Pakistan has always called upon the parties to demonstrate restraint, avoid escalation, and scrupulously adhere to the international humanitarian law. We firmly believe that only a meaningful dialogue which addresses the security concerns of all sides is anchored in the principles of UN Charter and international law and respects the relevant multilateral agreements can help secure peace. a peace that is both just and lasting. Pakistan stands ready to support all regional and international efforts that can pave the way for a peaceful resolution of the current conflict. President, I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome the new permanent representatives of the United States to the Council. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement. Before giving the floor to the United States, I'd like to welcome the new permanent representative of the United States, Ambassador Michael Waltz, to the Security Council. We look forward to working closely with you in the coming days. You have the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, and it's very good to be with you and this esteemed body for the first time. Thank you, ASG Yensha, for your briefing. And of course, I too welcome the participation of Estonia's foreign minister in this briefing as well. Colleagues, just 9 days ago, this council met to discuss Russia's violation of Poland's airspace with a large number of military drones. In that meeting, the United States urged Russia to end the war in Ukraine and stop actions that could risk it escalating into a broader conflict. Instead, on September 19th, Russia again violated the airspace of a NATO member when 3 armed military aircraft flew 10 nautical miles into Estonian airspace, coming within 15 miles of the Estonian parliament. And as we said 9 days ago, the United States stands by our NATO allies in the face of these airspace violations, and I want to take this first opportunity to repeat and to emphasize the United States and our allies will defend every inch of NATO territory. Russia must urgently stop such dangerous behavior. At a time when President Trump in the United States has been focused and spent an enormous amount of time and effort to end this horrific war between Russia and Ukraine, we expect Russia to seek ways to de-escalate, not risk expansion. This event, following on the heels of the Russian drone incursion into Polish airspace, creates the impression that Russia either wants to escalate and pull more countries into this conflict with Ukraine, or doesn't have full control of those who operate its fighter planes and drones. So either scenario is very disconcerting, given that Russia is obviously a nuclear power with global reach. And so I once again urge Russia as a permanent member of this council to uphold international peace and security, to respect the sovereignty of its neighbors, to cease violating their airspace, and I call on Russia to negotiate directly with Ukraine to end that war. I thank you, and I very much am honored and look forward to working with each of you. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of the United States for the statement. I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the representative of the Republic of Korea. To begin, my gratitude goes to ASG Yensha for the statement. Colleagues, the Republic of Korea is seriously concerned by the most recent in a series of deeply alarming incidents, this time impacting the territorial integrity of Estonia. On Friday, we were dismayed by reports of fighter jets from the Russian Federation violating Estonian airspace and remaining there over the Gulf of Finland for a total of 12 minutes. We note that this incident led to some countries responding by scrambling their jets in yet another troubling event over European territory. This once again appears to represent a significant breach of the sovereignty of United Nations member state, which could further threaten European and international security and simultaneously erode diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine. Friday's incidents in the Estonian skies represent just the latest occurrence in a series of concerning actions following the recently reported Russian drone breaches of Poland and Romania. Colleagues, at this Council's 12th September meeting, in response to the violation of Poland's territorial integrity, my delegation warned that this incident was a resounding wake-up call and could mark a dangerous turning point. One, where the war in Ukraine may no longer be able to be contained, instead spreading incrementally and insidiously further into Europe. Today, we reiterate our expanding concern over yet another seeming escalation. This incident suggests a troubling pattern that could proliferate and interconnect, raising the risk of grave miscalculation over even miscommunication. And it vividly illustrates the urgency of decisively ending this war. Colleagues, we remind once again the Security Council of Russia and the DPRK's ongoing unlawful military cooperation, which violates multiple Security Council resolutions and directly threats peace and security in Europe and Asia. It must stop immediately. In conclusion, alongside the international community, the Republic of Korea continues to support diplomatic efforts to bring about lasting peace in this region. And I resume my functions as President of the Council. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Margus Charkuna, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Estonia.
Your Excellencies, thank you, President. Please allow me to thank the Presidency for convening the Security Council meeting at such a short notice. And I also would like to thank ASG Jensa for his valuable briefing. Ladies and gentlemen, what brings us here today is alarming. On 19 September 2025, 3 armed Russian MiG-31 fighter jets deliberately entered Estonian airspace in violation of our territorial integrity. They remained in our skies for 12 minutes, penetrating up to 10 kilometers deep and covering nearly 100 kilometers inside our sovereign territory. These are the hard facts based on solid evidence, whatever Russia is claiming. And let me show you the screenshot from our most modern radar screenshot. So you can see here as well, the red line is a violation of Estonian territory and sovereignty. You can see it very clearly. This is a fact. This is not something else. So here you can say, you can also see the radar screenshot where Russia fighter jets entered, where they were, and how they went out. They were warned already before. There was a very clear communication on all different channels as well, visibly. And there was no response, and just Russian fighter jets, they continued the violation of Estonian and also NATO airspace for 12 minutes, 100 kilometers. And this is a lot. And these are the hard evidences for that. Also, there are pictures of these fighter jets, and it is very clear that these fighter jets, they carried as well missiles. All of them, they carried missiles, and they were combat-ready planes. And you can see from here as well, Russian representatives, that these are the photos which really were taken during this heavy violation of NATO and Estonian airspace. So what I want to say, that violation is crystal clear, and Russia is lying again, as it has been lied before several times. We remember the occupation of Georgia, 2008, 2014, Crimea, 2022, aggression against Ukraine started. So please don't lie again. Hard evidence is here. So it is a dangerous escalation. It was a fourth violation of Estonia's airspace by Russia this year alone. By this one was deeper, longer, with 3 armed aircraft simultaneously and just minutes flight time away from Tallinn, our capital. I want to recall that member states' sovereignty and territorial integrity on land, at sea, and in the air must be respected at all times. So this was yet another reckless and flagrant violation of the United Nations Charter and of international law by our neighbor. We are here today because this violation of our sovereignty and threat of use of force concerns not only Estonia, but the entire international community. The 19 September incursion was not an isolated act, but part of a broader pattern of Russian provocations against its neighbors, while the permanent member of the Security Council continues its full-scale war of aggression against Ukraine. On 9th of September, Russia presently violated Poland's borders by sending 19 drones into Poland's airspace. On 13th of September, a Russian attack drone flew for almost an hour over Romanian territory. Russian drones have been also found in Latvia and Lithuania, our neighboring countries. Russia's dangerous behavior cannot be tolerated. To do so would seriously undermine not only the United Nations Charter and the international law, but would set very dangerous precedent, encouraging further aggression, fueling regional and global tensions, and ultimately endangering global peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in 34 years since Estonia joined the United Nations, we were obliged to ask the presidency to convene this meeting in the spirit of the preventive diplomacy and in order to stop immediately attempts at further escalation by Russia. We use this occasion to call again on the Russian Federation loud and clear to cease, without delay, its war of aggression against sovereign Ukraine and to abide by the obligations enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. We call on Russia to end all provocations and threats against its neighbors' sovereignty and territorial integrity. The international community must stand firm in demanding an end to these blatant breaches of the United Charter in order to prevent further escalation and to ensure international peace and security. Ladies and gentlemen, Estonia is convinced that all responsible members of the international community should always call out such outrageous actions by any member of the United Nations, and even more so by a permanent member of the Security Council, entrusted with a special responsibility to safeguard international peace and security. And yet, words are not enough. As Russia itself has become a real threat to global peace and security, we need to exercise collectively maximum pressure on Russia, forcing it to just and lasting peace in Ukraine and forcing it to abandon its criminal, neo-colonial and imperial ambitions. Together we can hold Russia accountable for its crime of aggression against Ukraine, for the war crimes and crimes against humanity it has committed since 2014, and for its ongoing violations of international treaties and agreements it has pledged to uphold. Impunity, appeasement and further concessions would only embolden Putin and would lead to new crimes. We can succeed only if acting decisively together in defense of the United Nations Charter and the international law. Finally, let me assure that the members of the Security Council and wider audience that Russia's threats and provocations are not going to weaken our resolve to support Ukraine is its defense against the Russian aggression. Just and lasting peace in Ukraine will strengthen the multilateral system based on international law, with the United Nations and its charter at the core, as well as international peace and security across the globe. Thank you, President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Takna for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Kaja Kallas, High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy and Vice President of the European Commission.
Thank you, Mr. President, Excellencies. The United Nations was founded on a set of shared values and principles, foremost the pursuit of peace and security. Although these values are being continuously tested and tried, the adherence to these values is still what brings us together in this room. There is one country present here in this room which is actively seeking to undermine the values and principles the nations of the United Nations have committed upholding. Last week, Russia once again violated international law and the sovereignty of an European country. For 12 minutes, 3 armed Russian fighter jets blatantly violated Estonian airspace. The same type of fighter jets that regularly bomb innocent civilians in Kiev. The recent violation of Estonian airspace is unprecedented in both scale and recklessness. It was a deliberate provocation which could have ended with devastating results. This comes after Russian violation of both Polish as well as Romanian airspace with drones a week earlier. It cannot be that Russia accidentally violates 3 times in 2 weeks European airspace. And if it was accidentally, it was a mistake, there has been plenty of time for Russian Federation to apologize and say, sorry, we made a mistake. Instead, we see a pattern. Russia is testing European borders, probing our resolve, undermining the security of the whole of Europe. Russia will continue to provoke as long as we allow it. Therefore, the United Nations and the international community must clearly condemn such actions. It is a breach of the UN Charter, which obliges all states to respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of other countries. And it is particularly cynical that a permanent member of the UN Security Council, entrusted with safeguarding peace, actively seeks to undermine it. Russia's aggression against Ukraine continues, and now it is extending provocations against the European Union members. Russia hopes that it might force us to draw our focus away from supporting Ukraine and focus solely on our own security. Well, let me be very clear. European security starts with Ukraine. And any provocation against EU member states will only strengthen our resolve to support Ukraine. I say this openly to Russian representatives in this room. Your government's actions are reckless, dangerous, and go against the very principles of the United Nations. Our response is united and firm. First, we stand in full solidarity with Estonia, Poland, and Romania. Second, we collectively condemn Russian sovereignty violations. And third, the European Union will continue to help strengthen European defense and deterrence together with NATO. And fourth, for every test or every violation of our security, our resolve to support Ukraine grows. Russia cannot be allowed to normalize such behavior. International law is not optional. The sovereignty and security of one member state is sovereignty and security of all. I call on you to condemn Russia's violation of Estonia's airspace. Thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Kallas for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Radoslav Sikorski, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland.
Mr. President, Excellencies, This Emergency Security Council meeting has been called because a mere week after Russia sent drones into Poland, 3 Russian MiG-31 fighter jets with their transponders off entered Estonian airspace without authorization and lingered for 12 minutes. On the same day, 2 Russian fighter jets violated the security zone over the Polish drilling platform in our economic zone in the Baltic Sea. If these were accidents, why not immediately acknowledge them and apologize? We have given Russia a pass in the past in such circumstances. But we have not heard any apologies, only lies. Together with the intensification of attacks on Ukraine, they seem to be an eloquent comment on, quote, moving from confrontation to dialogue, end quote, promised by Vladimir Putin in Alaska. These breaches of airspace are suspect because they are an escalation of hybrid war which Russia has waged against the West for years. Murders of politicians, journalists, human rights defenders and defectors, cyber attacks against hospitals and financial institutions, arsons, including in Poland, UK and Lithuania, postal packages containing incendiary devices all over Europe, including Germany, attacks on Ukrainian embassies, in addition to standard espionage and disinformation. Excellencies, this Council has a responsibility to send a clear message that such provocations will not be tolerated. It must stand in solidarity with Estonia, Romania, Poland, and all nations whose sovereignty is threatened by systemic Russian aggression. To the representatives of Russia, I have this to say. We know you don't care for international law and you are incapable of living in peace with your neighbors. Your insane nationalism contains a lust for domination that will not cease until you realize that the age of empires is over and that your empire will not be rebuilt. Every drone strike by the heroes of the armed forces of Ukraine, may God bless them, brings this day closer. Your 3-day special military operation can't even conquer Donbass for 10 years now. But the potential for criminal, catastrophic Russian mistakes is still there. By ordering mobilization in 1914, you precipitated the start of World War I, which bled Europe white and led to your Bolshevik Revolution. By signing the Hitler-Stalin Pact, you helped launch World War II, the bloodiest in history. By Sovietizing Central Europe, you caused the Cold War. Don't start another one. We are peaceful democracies who have studiously avoided actively joining your attempt to reconquer Ukraine. But we will not be intimidated. I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine about it. You have been warned. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Sikorsky for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Johann Wadephul, Federal Minister for Foreign Affairs of Germany.
Mr. President, 12 minutes. 12 minutes in which 3 Russian fighter jets brazenly ventured into Estonian airspace. 12 minutes in which they made their way almost to the Estonian capital, to Tallinn. What happened early Friday morning marked a further dangerous escalation by Russia. The incursion came just over a week after more than 20 Russian drones had entered Polish airspace. Once again, in Estonia, Russia violated, without any provocation, the territorial integrity of one of its neighbors, and thus one of the fundamental principles of the UN Charter. We condemn this grave violation of international law. This is not the behavior of a state seeking to preserve global peace and security, but one of recklessly disregarding international norms. Together with our partners, Germany stands firmly in solidarity with Estonia. We stand together against those who seek to use military coercion to undermine our sovereignty, freedom, and solidarity. The most recent alarming incidents bring to light two significant insights. First, Russia's ongoing aggression is not only directed against Ukraine and its people, rather, in its reckless behavior, Russia poses a serious danger to regional security as well as to global peace and stability. Second, there were many initiatives for negotiations, most recently under the strong leadership of the United States. Ukraine is ready to engage and has repeatedly offered an immediate and unconditional ceasefire. Nonetheless, Russia has repeatedly chosen not only to continue, but to intensify its aggression. This must end. Let there be no doubt, reckless provocations will not work. This is not just a problem for Russia's immediate neighbors. This is a problem for all of us, united here in our commitment to the UN Charter and its principles. Germany stands for these principles. Russia does not. We will not rest until a sustainable and just peace in Ukraine is achieved, a peace that is rooted in the principles of the UN Charter and negotiated with Ukraine sitting at the table. An unconditional ceasefire is urgently needed to stop the bloodshed and to lay the foundation to build trust for sincere negotiations. The people of Ukraine, as well as the people of Estonia and Poland, just as the people of every country, have the right to live in peace and security. It is our shared responsibility as UN member states to hold those accountable who endanger peace and security. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Vadeful for the statement. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Andrei Sybiha, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Thank you for organizing this important meeting. Just 10 days ago, this Council held an emergency meeting requested by Poland after being intruded by 2,000 Russian drones. Today, we are meeting at the urgent request of Estonia after 3 Russian jets violated its airspace. What's next? Which other emergency meeting will we have to hold in the coming weeks? Who will be the next country dealing with Russia's provocations? None of these developments were accidental. No, Moscow does this on purpose. A country occupying a permanent seat in this council is destroying international peace and security it is supposed to maintain. The logic is simple. Russia escalates to force everyone to play by its rules. It wants to impose the law of the jungle upon everyone, might make right. Our goal is the opposite. We must make Russia play by our rules. We have such rules accepted by everyone. They called the UN Charter. It is important that existing tools to be in the Security Council meeting or invocation of NATO Article 4 are actively used. However, political action should be backed by strong practical steps. Weak or late responses will only encourage further aggression. Europe is not at war with Russia, but Russia is at war with Europe. And the only way to safeguard peace is to respond with strength and unity. The best way to prevent a larger war in Europe is to increase support for Ukraine. If you help us end this war sooner with respect to the UN Charter, Russia will not expand it to other nations. Mr. President, A strong response means that a threat should not be escorted neither for 12 minutes nor for 1 minute. It should be neutralized. We reiterate our readiness for air defense integration. This is our European sky over Ukraine and other European nations. This is our common security space, and we must have a common sky shield to protect us all. Ukraine is the only country in the world countering regular massive air attacks of more than 500,000 drones and missiles, and we are ready to share experience and join forces. An integrated European air defense system combining intelligence, early warning, and active interception is essential. We have the capabilities, experience, and alliances, but action must be decisive, adequate, and swift. Other elements of a strong response include devastating sanctions, pressure on, and strong deterrence packages for Ukraine. The Russian war machine can only be stopped through strength, not weakness. Wait and see is not a strategy. Let's abandon wishful thinking. Russia poses an existential threat to Europe, and it will not disappear if we close our eyes. Ukraine has learned many bitter lessons in the past. What we now see in Poland and Estonia reminds of how Russian aggression against Ukraine started. Hybrid attacks and escalation, unmarked soldiers, violations of state border, and other steps. We can see this pattern repeating, but in another forms. The only effective way to counter this escalation is to respond with strength and unity. In conclusion, we reiterate that aggression against any European nation threatens the security of all. Only united action can prevent escalation and preserve peace in Europe. We stand in solidarity with our friendly Estonia, with the Estonian government and people, and we are ready to contribute to our shared security. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Sibiha for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Oana Silvia Toiu, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Romania.
Mr. President, thank you for this opportunity to take the floor at this emergency meeting of the UN Security Council, where we meet again to defend the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. I also want to thank Assistant Secretary General Miroslav Yenka for his briefing. Outside the Council chamber, our conversations focus on the UN80 and the importance of fundamental principles enshrined in the UN Charter. It is dismaying that one permanent member of the Security Council is out of sync and blatantly violates these principles. Russia has repeatedly violated the sovereign airspace of European countries. Now it is Estonia. Last week it was Romania. Before that, Poland. In the case of Romania, in most of these cases, there were involved drones of Iranian origin. We strongly condemn Russia's reckless and dangerous behavior, which directly endangers even more international peace and security. We stand together with Estonia, Poland, and our partners and allies in rejecting such behavior and defending key principles of the Charter and international law. Today, I speak on behalf of Romania. We are the country with the largest border with Ukraine of all its peaceful neighbors, and one of the countries whose sovereign airspace was tested by Russia on various occasions since its war of aggression against Ukraine. At the same time, the war triggered by Russia might affect security in the Black Sea, unless, together with our neighbors, together with our international partners, we invest in defensive and early warning instruments, such as common maritime security approach, both within the European Union, among the Black Sea participants, and NATO. We need to address the insecurity in this key region of Europe with global relevance that affects maritime security, commercial shipping lanes, both regionally and globally, as well as access to vital goods to our markets, including grains, key commodities, and food supplies. Even a perceived lack of reaction from the international community, especially this Council, might encourage future provocations, but we can also do the opposite and discourage them. We need to firmly reject, once and for all, this unjustified and unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. We all want peace, but that also means that we need strength, and strength is achieved together. Mr. President, Within the international community, most of the world nations are aligned to the need to protect the principles of the UN Charter. We join previous speakers' call to Russia to stop all provocations and threats against the sovereignty and territorial integrity of other states. Russia should not be emboldened to continue such behavior. In this context, my government welcomes the efforts undertaken by the United States, the European Union, and world leaders to put an end to Russia's war of aggression, and especially respects the effort of Ukraine, and we stand together for peace. Action is of essence now. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Mr. Stoiu for the statement, and I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. David Van Hill, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Asylum and Migration of Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Benelux countries, Belgium, Luxembourg, and my own country, the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The Benelux countries welcome that the Council urgently addresses these unprovoked violations of Estonian airspace. We condemn these violations in the strongest possible terms. It is yet another clear and unacceptable violation by Russia of the territorial integrity of a sovereign nation. And this is not an isolated incident. It cannot be ignored. It has been less than 2 weeks ago that in this very council you discussed the violation of Polish airspace. And we are, unfortunately, seeing a wider pattern of Russian provocations against its neighbors while Russia continues its full-scale war of aggression against Ukraine. This incident demonstrates that if Russia's aggression remains unchecked, it is bound to repeat itself. We call on this Council and all member states to make clear that this reckless behavior is not only unacceptable, but also presents clear risks to peace and security. It is imperative that we all protect the UN Charter and international law, and the territorial integrity and sovereignty of all nations must be respected. These are the cornerstones of 80 years of the United Nations. The Benelux countries will defend these principles, standing shoulder to shoulder with Estonia. The path to peace is clear. The Russian Federation needs to end its war of aggression in Ukraine and choose the path of meaningful negotiations for a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace. And all the members of this Council and all UN member states have a responsibility to play their role in safeguarding global stability. That means holding Russia back from further destabilizing international peace and security in the interest of us all. Thank you, Mr. President.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Van Hill for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Maria Malmö Schneidergaard, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Sweden.
Thank you, President. I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the 5 Nordic states, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and my own country, Sweden. President, the Nordics condemn Russia's serious violation of Estonian airspace and thus of its territorial integrity on the 19th of September. The Nordics stand in full solidarity with Estonia. Like our Baltic friends, the Nordic region shares a long border with Russia. We are deeply concerned about Russia's lack of respect for the territorial integrity of its neighbors. By violating Estonian airspace, Russia has again shown its reckless and lawless behavior. Not even 2 weeks ago, the Security Council convened in another emergency session following Russia's violation of Poland's airspace. Since then, Russia has also violated Romania's airspace. We urge Russia to immediately stop and to bear its responsibility as a permanent member of this Council. Russia's recent airspace violations and its broader campaign of malicious activities against other countries illustrates the seriousness of Russia's threat to international security. It only strengthens our resolve in facing this threat by upholding our sovereignty and territorial integrity, as well as further intensifying our long-standing support to Ukraine. Over the past weeks, Russia has increased its attacks against Ukraine. Last week alone, Russia launched more than 1,500 strike drones, 1,280 guided aerial bombs, and 50 missiles against Ukraine, according to Ukrainian reports. These are not the actions of a country that seeks peace. The Nordic countries support a comprehensive, just and lasting peace based on the UN Charter and international law. A peace must respect Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity. President, we need to remind ourselves that Russia is waging a war of aggression against Ukraine in blatant violation of international law. Russia could end its war tomorrow. Until it does, the Nordics stand undeterred in face of Russia's illegal actions. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Malmö Steingart for the statement. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Babia Bratze, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Latvia.
Mr. President, I deliver this statement on behalf of two Baltic states, Lithuania and my own country, Latvia. I thank the Presidency of the Council for convening this meeting, and I thank Assistant Secretary General Janša for the briefing. Lithuania and Latvia stand in full solidarity with our neighbor and ally, Estonia. On 12 September, this Council strongly condemned the violation of Polish airspace by a massive Russian drone incursion. We expressed our full solidarity with Poland at that meeting, and we warned of the risk of further provocations by Russia. Now it is Estonia calling this meeting in response to another grave and deliberate escalation by Russia. Mr. President, Europe has witnessed a growing number of Russia's non-conventional attacks, ranging from GPS jamming, sabotage, attempts to place explosives on DHL planes, to drone incursions. Russia's war in Ukraine and Russia's flagrant violation of Estonia's airspace once again demonstrates Russia's complete disregard for the authority of this Council, and also for the demands expressed by international community in numerous UN General Assembly resolutions. And Mr. President, let me say, we are not facing a Ukraine crisis. We are faced with a Russia crisis. As we speak at this emergency meeting, Russia continues to target and destroy Ukrainian cities, critical civilian infrastructure, kill innocent civilians, medical personnel, children, women, all in pursuit of a land grab. Contrary to the efforts of the President of the United States and European and Ukrainian partners, Russia doesn't seek peace. Russia's imperial and colonial ambitions brutally violate UN Charter. Remember Georgia in 2008, Crimea in 2014, and then the full-scale aggression against Ukraine since 2022. Mr. President, today in 1939, Soviet and Nazi forces held a joint military parade to celebrate invading and partitioning Poland. We will never accept Russia's attempts to attack, dominate, intimidate, or establish a sphere of influence over its neighbors. Empires are dead. We, the free and democratic countries, will continue to invest in our deterrence, defense, resilience. We are working closely with our allies to deploy additional capabilities to ensure that future Russian provocations are not tolerated. And we ask the Council to continue to be engaged on upholding international peace and security. We are committed to it. Yet, ironically, again, it is the aggressive, revanchist behavior of Russia, permanent member of this August Council, who is gravely undermining global security. So Latvia and Lithuania call on this Council and all UN member states to condemn Russia's aggressive actions in the strongest terms. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Baiba Bratze for the statement. There are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.
Progress has been achieved over As part of our commitment to human rights and the dignity of every person, Monaco has always supported international efforts for advancing gender equality. Both on our soil and through international cooperation, the Principality has been working proactively to promote girls' access to education, women's economic empowerment and independence, as well as the fight against all forms of violence, including in conflict and crisis contexts. The Monegasque Committee for the Protection and Promotion of Women's Rights was established in 2018. Today, this is the cornerstone for mobilization and awareness at the national level. The government of our Principality is working closely with UN agencies such as UN Women and its Sport for Generation Equality framework, which recognizes the role of sports as key leverage towards social transformation. Monaco is proud of supporting this initiative. We believe that sports should be an engine for empowerment, for respect, and for solidarity. UNICEF and UNFPA are also key partners for our action through tangible projects. So these partnerships help to anchor the principles of the Beijing Declaration in action.